When Caleb started working for Answers in Genesis, I was just asking him, what was the first book he got with his 50% off employee discount? And I think it was this Jensen book on Traced, which is, a genetics book, but it delves into the division of languages and things like that. And ever since he was little, Caleb has had a real interest in languages. We'd go to like half-price books, and he bought like this CD set of Teach Yourself Japanese and such, and I'm like, that's going to last like 5 days, if that. And it actually lasted a long time. He taught himself to speak Japanese pretty well. He can read it and write it very well, and so he's got this interest and knack for languages, and it's kind of one of the things he really wants to study further. And so I asked him earlier in the year if he would mind doing a Sunday school class for us, and this is the subject matter that he selected to bring before us. So join me in welcoming Caleb. His slides are going to be a little small, so you might want to move forward if you really want to read the slides well, and you get a better view of them. So that said, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, good morning. As my father mentioned, my name is Caleb. I'm pretty sure I know everyone in the room. Some people I'm not 100% sure on. Lady back in the right corner there, I don't think I know you. No, you with the dark hair. The one that looks just like me, yeah. As my father mentioned, this is a passion topic of mine. I have enjoyed and loved the study of languages ever since I was little. When I was, 3 or 4, I started asking mom and dad how much they knew and remembered from their high school and college French courses, so I could start to learn that. I learned, how to ask for the bathroom and things like that. But that interest has continued into the rest of my life. I've been studying languages for several years now. Am I fluent in many of them? Not particularly, but can I understand and hold a conversation? Yes. So this is the topic that I've chosen to speak about. So this is a biblical view on linguistics, specifically the origin of modern language. So we're going to start off with the Tower of Babel. Now the question is, do you pronounce it Babel or Babel? I know some people who would pronounce it Babel. I pronounce it Babel, and I believe that is the correct way. So the Tower of Babel is a passage in the book of Genesis. It's relatively small, but it's a vitally important passage to understand the importance of even the salvific message. Because with languages being divided, how can one communicate the salvific message efficiently? So the primary piece of the Tower of Babel is going to come from Genesis 11, verses 1 through 9. Although Genesis 10 also has some very important characters, I guess we'll call them, who would be very influential in this story. Think people like Nimrod, the mighty hunter, and so on and so forth, who were leaders during this time. So reading directly the passage of the Tower of Babel, starting in Genesis 10, verse 1. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and unto them were sons born after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshech, and Tiras, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz. I'm in Genesis 10. I apologize. Switching to the correct chapter of the Bible, Genesis 11, verses 1 through 9. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the lands of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said unto another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime for they had for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, so they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad, and from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore the name of it is called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So, this passage clearly mentions where the people settled after the flood, which would be the plain of Shinar, which is in modern-day Mesopotamia, which, for those of you who don't know, which I believe would be nobody, is just the Middle East between the Tigris and Euphrates River, primarily, is where the Mesopotamia area is. It's also known academically as the cradle of civilization. So after all congregating in one spot and directly disobeying God's commands to, fill the earth and subdue it, God came down and confused the language of all of the people there who originally spoke just one language. So going into this, we can see that from one language we now have numerous. There's a lot. So the big questions I'm aiming to answer here are, where did modern languages come from? Are they the same languages that God originally divided them into? What was the original language that God confused? Was it Hebrew, as many people claim? And why is this important? Why should I care? And how does this impact my life and walk with God? So, going into part one, the evolution of language. So, first question, who is language? So despite the word language being a noun, it is not a person. In case you were wondering who uses languages, the answer is everyone. The next question is, what is language? So the hint there is you know at least one. If my slides want to work. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a language is the system of spoken or written communication used by a particular country, people, community, or etc., typically consisting of words used within a regular grammatical and syntactic structure, also a formal system of communication by gesture, especially as used by deaf people. So basically, a language is the primary method of interpersonal communication. So next question is, when is language? Regarding the formation of language, the origin of what we know now goes back to the aforementioned Tower of Babel. Modern language is vastly different to what the languages would have looked like upon the division of the languages in Genesis 11. As for the exact date that languages were split, we simply do not know. What we do know is that it was before yesterday and after the creation of the world. So the next question is, where is language? So language is used throughout the entirety of the world. Spoken, written, and sign language are used to communicate with everyone. Languages are different in every part of the world, however, they are all used to communicate. The origin of language is divine. God separated the languages himself, meaning that the reason cultures and countries are so linguistically and culturally diverse is because of God's design. However, the physical origin point of languages, while not precisely known, can be traced back to Mesopotamia, where the people congregated to build the original Tower of Babel. So the next question is, why is language? So as previously mentioned, languages are divine in origin. God separated them himself at the Tower of Babel. Originally, it was used as a curse or a form of punishment, making it so that people couldn't communicate with one another. Therefore, people wouldn't, kind of congregate in one place, disobeying God's commandments to spread out into the earth. So humans are inherently social creatures. There have been numerous studies proving that. I have a study cited there from 2008 by Mr. Young. Because of this, not being able to effectively communicate with people is devastating in a world where previously you would have been able to talk with everyone. So therefore, the people who could communicate would, kind of congregate together in the people who they could understand, and just kind of spread out and go their own way in the world. So the next question is, how is language? So taking this question as, how does language work? there are many nuances that go into the functioning of a language. However, broken down simply, a language's core parts are a subject, a predicate, nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. A subject is what a sentence is about. So, for example, the subject of that previous sentence would be the word subject. The predicate is what happens to the subject in a sentence. I'm thinking of an example. There's many examples. Jeffrey ran, for example. So so, that's, the running is the action taken by Jeffrey, so therefore the predicate would be run. A noun is typically the subject of a sentence. It is a person, place, or thing. And a verb is typically the predicate of a sentence. It is an action word. So run, jump, fly, climb, etc. An adjective is a word that describes a noun. Think the color, shape, texture, smell, or taste of an object. And an adverb is a word that describes a verb. So think how something is done. Somebody is running quickly. Someone is jumping high, etc. So sentence structure and grammar rules vary between languages, but these are kind of primary aspects that are present in every language. What's happening, the person it's happening to, and the descriptors of what is happening. So the change in language, has language really evolved? Language has changed drastically through the years since the Tower of Babel. It's just an example to prove this point. Let's look at the English language through the years. So first off, we have William Shakespeare. Very much what we consider fancy English, although despite at the time it was actually considered very common and easily understandable. So this is just kind of an example of what English looked like hundreds of years ago. We have modern English, so what you normally would speak and say to people, read in a book, just kind of the easily understandable, what we have as modern language. And then there is New Gen English. So think when people text people or when people are on social media, it's like an entirely different dialect almost. There's different rules, there's different structures. It's actually fascinating how linguistically different it is to text somebody than to talk with them face to face. A lot of changes have been made specifically with texting to convey emotion more accurately. And so a lot of proper grammar is actually considered passive-aggressive or angry. If you use proper commas and periods in a sentence while you're texting somebody, most of the time they'll think they're mad at you. So just... So English has changed over the centuries. Where are you going with this? So using English as an example, it is easy to see how language has changed over the years. Using this logic, we can apply it on a larger scale. So let's look at different dialects. You might think that English doesn't really have any dialects. However, let's look at the official definition of a dialect. So a dialect, according to Oxford Dictionary, is a form or variety of language which is peculiar to a specific region, especially one which differs from the standard or literary form of the language in respect of vocabulary, pronunciation, idiom, and etc. Also, provincial or rustic speech. In this sense, technically, English spoken in New York City could be considered a dialect. However, let me show you my absolute favorite English dialect. Cajun. So, if this wants to work for me, there we go. The Cajun region is in south-central Louisiana and is a remarkably unique part of the U.S. The Cajun people and culture originated in western France, the Vendée region in particular. However, the people who became the Cajuns were actually immigrants to what is now Nova Scotia, Canada. However, in the past, the area that is currently known as Nova Scotia changed hands frequently, ending up in the hands of the British. Many of the Cajuns, who were then known as Acadians, did not want to bow to the British crown or church or anything like that. They wanted to maintain their identity as French. So they were shipped all over the world, some back to France, some into the Caribbean, some to the east coast of the US, just all over. So the Acadians, being dissatisfied with their treatment by the British, many of them kind of migrated and congregated in modern-day Louisiana, which is now the hub of Cajun culture and, food, music, everything like that. So Cajun culture is a unique blend of French and American culture and language, and it's become a truly wonderful example of some of the circumstances that can completely change culture and language. This is a beautiful example of the evolution of language and culture that has taken place in the last few centuries. So, broader application. We're talking about language families here. So taking into account how language and culture can change and evolve, let's look back at the Tower of Babel. While it is theoretically possible for God to have split the languages into every language we have today, he's God, he can do whatever he wants. It's vastly more likely that God split the languages into several different language families. Similar to how some modern Christian scientists point to the diverse species of modern day all being descended from different kinds of animals after the flood. Cough, cough, where I work, cough, cough. It is very feasible that God split the languages into different kinds of language, the Tower of Babel. So looking here into defining a language family. To quote Thomas More Devlin, the editorial lead for the company Babel, which a language family is simply any group of languages that share a common root language. For anyone confused as to what the company Babel might be, it is a language learning company that aims to teach people language by immersion. So basically, they change, if you wanted to learn Spanish, they will give you a bunch of shows and movies, books that are all exclusively in Spanish, so that you can kind of learn by osmosis. So as you're reading, you're just kind of picking up more grammatical traits. It's the best way to learn a language is by immersion. So one of the most familiar examples of a language family would be the Romance language family. So the Romance language family is not romance like you would think of it as the word today. The Romance language family is the language family that includes French, Spanish, Italian, and many other, particularly European languages. This is the most famous language family in the world, and it is remarkably easy to see the similarities in each individual language. You can see there are grammatical and vocabulary similarities in French, English, Spanish, Latin. That's because the Romance language families all have roots in Latin. That's why they're called Romance languages, as they all draw their roots from Rome. So other language families are similar to this in concept, all drawing from one original language and branching off from it, kind of like a tree. That would be kind of the best illustrative aid to what I'm talking about here is a tree. There's one trunk and multiple branches off of that trunk, and then each branch has multiple branches as well. It's a good analogy. Now, you might be wondering, is it English a Latin-based language? Isn't it Romantic or a Romance language? Many people believe so. No, English is not a Romance language. It is a Germanic language. So English, the strange and, depending on who you ask, not so beautiful child. I will say, this is the subtitle there. If English was not my native language, I would do everything in my power to avoid learning it. Many people have been told that English is a Latin-based language, and because of that, people usually try to recommend learning other Latin-based languages because they're easier to pick up on. So clearing this up, English is actually a Germanic language. There's not any flexibility on that. It's not Latin-based at all. There are influences from Latin and numerous other languages because English has become a bizarre Frankenstein-esque amalgamation of language and grammar. There are no set-in-stone rules in English, and there's nothing you can do to escape that. There are exceptions to everything. Looking here, I'm looking at my notes. This is a joke. I'm going to skip that. So, jokes aside, English is a unique language in its flexibility. English, in large part, because of the U.S.'s importance on a global scale, and because of its identity as a melting pot, has become a language that just kind of absorbs the quirks and even sometimes grammatical structure of numerous other languages and even language families. Simultaneously, English has also had a surprisingly large impact on foreign languages as well. If you look, for example, at Japanese, there are 3 writing systems in Japanese. There is kanji, which is the adaptation of Chinese characters into Japanese language. There is hiragana, which is strictly Japanese. It was created by Japanese for Japanese to either describe kanji in a newer type of hiragana made. What's it called? I can't remember the exact name for it, unfortunately, at the moment. But it's made to describe kanji and just kind of be its own Japanese language. A lot of people use it instead of kanji nowadays. And there's also katakana. Katakana is used exclusively for foreign words. Primarily, actually, those foreign words are English words that have been adapted into Japanese and just easier to pronounce in Japanese than if they were just in English. So if you wanted to read a Japanese newspaper, you would need to know, hold on, I'm doing the math right here, 2,134 characters, because that is how many, there's 96 characters in hiragana and katakana combined, and according to the Japanese government, you need to know over 2,000 kanji characters in order to function basically in Japan. So, if you ever are reading a Japanese newspaper and are confused, that's perfectly fine. So, recap on this section here. So applying what has been discussed about languages, while it is possible that God individually created all the modern languages we have today, it is significantly more likely that he just created individual language families that our modern languages originate from, having been changed multiple times through the years. Also recapping, language is divine in origin. God confusing the languages is just, therefore it makes it divine. But because God is such a loving, amazing creator, he has made even what was originally a curse into such a wonder of beauty and creativity. It's truly one of the most amazing displays of God's awesomeness that so much can be learned about history, culture, art, people, and numerous other things just by studying the language of a place. So moving on here into the second section, what was the original language? So short answer, we do not know, and it will not be possible for us to know until we get to heaven. So a lot of people think that it was originally Hebrew. As previously mentioned, there's not a way to accurately deduce what the original language might have been. Even if it was Hebrew, it would not be anything even remotely similar to the Hebrew language we know today. As amazing as the Hebrew language is, being actually the only dead language to ever be resuscitated, as it was basically declared not a dead language upon the foundation of the city-state of Israel now. For all we know, the original language potentially could have been an ancient form of J.R.R. Tolkien's Elvish language. My personal take on this is that if it was important enough for us to know for certain, we would know for certain. However, despite my great desire to know, it has not been revealed to me, therefore it must not be essential to our salvation. So, moving on to part 3, why should I care? So, first off, because it's cool. This is something that is not essential. I don't know why I forgot the not there. Oh, it's in the beginning. This is not something that is essential for your salvation. Therefore, this topic is something you do not need to care deeply about or even study. However, this is an incredible topic that truly displays God's power, majesty, creativity, and wonderfulness. The study of foreign languages and the understanding of grammar is not for everyone. And I don't expect anybody to suddenly be filled with a fire to learn Dutch all of a sudden. However, what I do hope this conveyed is that God is truly amazing, and that even speaking to those who you love is an incredible gift that God has given to us. To be able to communicate is such a beautiful thing, and the cultural and linguistic diversity in the world is just another way that God has shown his glory. So the continuation here is there are so many wonderful resources that we have in English that we seriously take for granted. There are millions, if not billions, of people around the world who desperately need to hear the word of God and a defense for why they should believe it in their own language. Whether that be a completely illiterate person in the jungle of South America that has never even heard of Jesus, or a well-to-do Japanese man that doesn't believe simply because there are not enough translated works that provide answers to his questions. All should be given the opportunity to be saved. Oftentimes, many countries are overlooked for missions work because they are a more wealthy or first world nation and are not openly hostile towards Christians. While there's absolutely nothing wrong with focusing on those who have never heard about Jesus in isolated areas of the world, I think it is also important not to overlook the people who are just as lost but are in more first world countries. For example here, I didn't want to continue to that slide. That's not my correct slide, I'm sorry. For example, just using Japan as an example, less than 1% of the Japanese population is Christian, and they are one of the most literate populations in the world. A large piece of that, in my opinion, is there are remarkably few resources translated into Japanese as a language, primarily because it is just kind of overlooked as a site for missions. So that's just something that is honestly heartbreaking. And one of the biggest reasons for it is in Japanese culture as a whole, it is just okay to believe everything. The way that their official religion works is Shinto Buddhism. Shinto is a uniquely Japanese language that is very similar to animism or spiritism, and Buddhism is Buddhism. So Shintoism, which was commonly believed, basically is just like, yeah, let's just believe everything, so we're just kind of covered. So if there's anything that goes wrong, we've got at least something right, and that's good for something. So the just kind of embracing nature of being able to, do just kind of, how do I speak? What's the word? I'm bad at public speaking. I can't think of the correct word, so I'm just going to... Inclusiveness, thank you. The inclusivity of the Japanese culture is a very dangerous thing because because there are not a lot of published works into Japan, people believe, oh, if I just believe in everything, then I'll be fine. Whereas it is clearly stated in the scripture that that is not the case. So it's very important to have translated works into numerous different languages, just kind of not excluding places as potential mission sites just because they are a more first world place. So then we're finally getting into the, well, that's not the correct slide either. How do I do this? Okay, then getting into this here. So final remarks, thank you for having me. First, I thank God if this has been even remotely impactful to just one person in the room. Second, I hope I've taught somebody something they didn't know today. Third, I pray that there's a revival in all parts of the world and that resources become more available to people in their own languages. And fourth, I ask for your prayers as part of my personal goal is to try to work to translate resources into other languages so they are more readily available for people. This is one of the primary reasons that I'm studying so many languages. So here are my references, and that's all I have prepared currently. So if there's any questions, Rachel?
Is your favorite Bible translation still the Hawaiian Pidgin language?
That is quite a fun one. I primarily use the KJV, but the Hawaiian Pidgin version is quite fun.
And question two, Taoism, is that popular in Japan at all, or is that mostly just...
So Taoism is primarily Chinese, along with Confucianism. It's very similar in nature as it is animistic and spiritualistic, but it is slightly different in that Taoism is less accommodating of a religion.
And also the Mormons are hitting Japan pretty good, so we need to step it up. All right, I'm done.
Harold.
I just have a comment. I am fascinated by your love of languages, and I am so proud of you for accepting the invitation to speak publicly, because you did a very good job. It's been an honor to watch you grow up in this church and become the man you've become, so thank you for that. Now the question, have you been to Japan? Have you had an opportunity to go there and meet people?
I have never been overseas. I would love to. I just do not have the time or resources currently to make a missions trip, which I would love to do. That's just a long-term plan.
I am crestfallen. I love to use that word, especially in here because it's a cool word. I am crestfallen by linguistics and AI. And I say that from this premise. My youngest daughter teaches at Cincinnati State and in English language arts. This past semester, she of course assigned many papers, etc. She had a young girl who knew not one single word of English. She was from China. And she was very upset because my daughter said, nothing you have written yet has been your own work. You've created this through AI. And I cannot, in good conscience, give you anything but an F because it's not your work. Cincinnati State's premise when approached by this young girl to say, I want this credit. I can't stay here unless I pass this class. Their response was, that's up to your instructor, which as an administrator in a school I was crestfallen by that as well. That they did not back my daughter up. They said, it's up to your daughter. So it was between my daughter and this chick. She stood her ground. She said, after you've written 5 papers and they're all F's, how can you ever pull yourself up to a passing grade? But my question to you after that very long description was, what do you see happening in linguistics with AI, with very little regulatory premises surrounding it at all? So what do you think?
I have numerous opinions on AI. I will summarize this as quickly as possible. To begin with, I can understand the benefits of AI. I can see why it would be a very valuable tool for numerous things. However, when it comes to interpersonal communication, work that one should do themselves, and artistic endeavors. I think artificial intelligence has no place whatsoever in those roles. AI can be a wonderful tool as like a database or as finding summaries of information, things like that. But when it comes to putting in the actual work and actually doing research and understanding things yourself, it is absolutely no substitution. I have numerous friends who are artists and authors as well, and AI is just not even a tool that I think should even be considered in fields like that. While it's cool that generative, I don't know that word. AI can take information and assimilate it into a visual structure. I do not think that is something that should be used as any substitute for actual human work. And then I also have friends, and I myself do some voiceover work. I narrate audiobooks occasionally on the side, and AI in voiceover is getting better and better. And while I can understand why people would want text-to-speech and things like that, rather than hiring a person to narrate or read their work, it's a lot cheaper. But I also think that the integrity of the work is better presented by an actual person than by AI. So those are my thoughts currently.
It's my understanding, though, Caleb, that you referenced that AI can be a very powerful tool, but even Whitcliffe is supplying their teams with AI tools to help people who are indigenous language, different groups around the world, to accelerate Bible transmission. So again, it's one of these advancement in technology. We don't want to limit people from attaining what God has created us to be and who He wants us to be. But it helps us in certain endeavors to be able to be more productive. So I think that's the balance you were commenting on. I mean, on the creative side, it becomes the question of, is the creator still being creative? Is it coming from the human? But in terms of the massive data, taking data and making it more available to be useful to people, it's an amazing tool.
Yeah. Kevin.
You mentioned that languages were created before today, which I agree with, and yet after the creation of the world. But we're told that God spoke creation into being. So how do we reconcile that?
So, when I say languages were created, I mean what we have as languages today. There was an original language, likely which was spoken by God, and as previously mentioned, I have no idea what that was. So language did indeed exist as a concept before we know it today, but the language as we know currently was created after the creation of the world and before yesterday.
I'd like to echo what Harold said. I think it's been really interesting what you're saying, and your enthusiasm makes it really interesting. And so, keep on, keep it on. And also, wouldn't you agree, could you describe, talking about development of English, and you talk from Shakespeare, but even pre-Shakespeare, the Great Vowel Shift, wasn't that the most important big change in English?
Yes, I would agree. That is a massive piece of English history. I just simply did not include that in the slides because I didn't know how many people would know that. And
The Great Vowel Shift. We went back to Chaucer, and then to try and hear how they spoke the Canterbury Tales, and then up about somewhere between that and then Shakespeare, there was they called the Great Vowel Shift. Everything began to be pronounced differently. Also, one more point, the new point is, you talked about how English is an amalgam of so many. We have 5 times more words than the French language, because the French, like Japanese, circumscribe what can be allowed in their language, whereas English just says come on into all kinds of new words.
Yet we have some words used differently, like produce and produce.
Yeah. Makes it tough for anyone to learn it.
It's interesting that, excuse me, the topic of the Tower of Babel and AI should come up in the same session. Because, mankind, let us build a building to reach the heavens. They want to be God-like. And man is constructing a system, AI, which we feel there are no limits. And with artificial intelligence comes robots that have this artificial intelligence. And there's a concern called when this singularity happens, and the singularity is when the artificial intelligence of these machines become such that they can now rule the world. So I wonder if the Lord will, at some point, do something about that and not allow that to happen.
Unfortunately, I cannot speak for God and His will personally, but
Ask your dad.
yeah, I'll have to ask him.
That's what Revelation's all about.
Some of these Revelation robots could be AI,
I see where you're coming from. I believe that what we currently have as an understanding of AI, it is not quite a danger to society on that level as of yet. While it could potentially become something more to be concerned about, I think the primary focus right now is not necessarily to create an artificial intelligence that could take over the world like a Matrix type situation, but more so, I think the primary thing to be concerned about AI currently is in a military aspect. I believe recently Ukraine operated a drone strike against Russia using drones, and that was a completely AI orchestrated attack that was devastating. So I think that is something more to be concerned about. It's more so the people who are using the tool than the tool itself to be concerned about. Similar to gun laws or things of that nature. AI is just another tool for people to use, and there are good people and bad people who have access to it. So I think that is try to keep it out of the hands of the bad people, but they'll get their hands on it anyways.
Caleb, you said we don't know what the original language is, and I think that's right. But that there are many who think that the original language was Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder why at least those of us who take the Bible seriously would even, if there are those among them, would even think that. Because it seems like Hebrew would have been one of the languages or in one of the families of languages after Babel.
Mm-hmm.
I think after all, Abraham, the father of Judaism, comes post-Babel.
Yes.
And not pre. Mm-hmm. And so it strikes me that our presumption would be that while there was common language, and no doubt, all the way back to Adam and Eve and God, that it would have been some other thing, and that with the creation of families of languages, which I think is absolutely right, not every individual one, that would have been post that.
It makes sense logically, doesn't it? However, I personally have spoken to numerous people who believe that despite Hebrew being in the Semitic language family, along with Arabic and Egyptian, people believe that Hebrew is essentially just a carrying over of the original language, so it's still preserved in some way.
Do they think that because
They
the
think-
Bible goes all the way back to Genesis 1:1 in Hebrew?
I believe the primary reason they think that is because the Jews are God's chosen people. And so, in their minds, it makes sense that the original language that God spoke would be the language that the Jews speak.
Oh, okay. Not that the Jews are original.
Right. So it is something that has practically no evidence in Scripture, and yet is a very popular theory that at least that I have found with people I've talked to. So that's why I mentioned it. Oh, sorry.
Languages change over time.
Yes.
We have the writings of Moses that go back almost 2,000 years prior to Christ. That's a long time to be writing, and a lot changed within Israel and the people. Is there any? And yet today, if I go look into a concordance, here's the definition of the word, whether it's used in Genesis or it's used in Micah. How has there been anything that has ever looked at, or have you ever looked at, how does that, over time, has there ever been words that change from a biblical perspective, biblical use?
In the research I have done, unfortunately, I have not looked at original Hebrew over the years as deeply as I would like to. However, the words change meaning immensely frequently. You can look 50 years ago at certain English words and they mean something completely different nowadays. So I think that while it is possible for the words in a particular language, the meaning to have changed in the modern understanding, that's really why it's important to look at translation at the original time of writing. Because, for example, if somebody looked at, let's take Shakespeare's work again, they looked at some of the phrasing in there, some of that sounds completely different if you were to take it in today's English. So it's really important to look at translated works from the framework of the time that they were both translated and written, because the grammatical and the linguistic structure and meaning does change over time. That's part of the evolution of language. So it's very important to have the correct lens when you're looking at any piece of literature, writing, anything.
I haven't done a lot of study in origins, but it seems to me that we have evidence that in Greek, Paul almost would be said to have created certain terms used differently than their original meaning in Greek.
What about in terms of written language? Is there like a first language that was first put into writing, or did that all happen about the same time? Or?
So with written language, it is different, as we don't have records, unfortunately, from the Tower of Babel itself. That would be fascinating if we did. But with written language, some of the earliest written languages would be Hebrew, and also Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Chinese. There's all sorts of records dating back thousands of years in all of those languages. So to my knowledge, I believe the current understanding is that hieroglyphics in Egypt are the oldest form of written language, and it is a primarily pictographical language. So there's certain sounds that are made, obviously, but it is primarily, each image, each character means its own thing, similar to Chinese. So while we can't really understand which exact written language came first or what it would have looked like before the Tower of Babel or even and during the flood and everything. I believe it is very safe to assume that there was a form of written language before and even during the flood, because records and things be very important for keeping track of, dimensions of things, number of things, cataloging things, even on the ark itself. So I think it is safe to assume there was written language before the Tower of Babel, but I have no idea what it would have looked like.
Any thoughts on linguistics in heaven?
There will be communication. I don't know what that'll look like exactly, unfortunately, but from reading and understanding the Bible and Revelation, there will be some form of communication. Maybe we'll all speak sign language. I don't know.
I believe Zephaniah mentions a pure speech that's restored in the end.
And that would make sense. You wouldn't have a Babel phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
You know what bugs me?
What?
Thank you for asking. When I was growing up, the word bad meant bad, not good. Even up into my early childhood, or early adulthood, bad meant bad. But in recent years and decades, bad meant good. Now means good. That's bad. That's good. We were in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Who saw it first?
We were in Chapel Hill, North Carolina last weekend, and my grandkids and my daughter say and talk to each other, and they say, when they refer to somebody, they say, bro. The men call the women bro, and the women call the women bro. Bro is brother. I call you guys bro. Hey bro, how's it going? But in North Carolina, Chapel Hill area, bro means a woman. And if you say, what was the other word? If you say,
If you say bless your heart,
oh yeah.
that's the middle finger. I didn't know that. I said, oh, bless your heart. There was one kid who made a really good catch. And my daughter looked at me and she said, don't say bless your heart to people in North Carolina. That means finger in Ohio. And I'm like,
It's insulted, it means you're an idiot.
So my question is, how does that happen? Why does that happen?
Yeah, so that is an example of dialect. So words carry different meanings. Inflections are very important when speaking. If you just spoke like a monotone robot the entire time, it would not be interesting, and it would also be hard to convey proper emotion. So it's very important to have inflection. It's very important to have just kind of that understanding when you go into a new area. It's also important to notice that in English in particular, and specifically the U.S., the parts of the U.S. are so culturally diverse despite being the same country. We looked at Cajun earlier, that's my favorite example, but you go down to North Carolina, you go down to Georgia, you go down to Virginia, all these other places in more the South, it is a completely different culture from New York City, from Ohio, from California. It is, different words mean different things, and it's due to the shift in culture and understanding. Likely what happened is, for example, for bless your heart, likely it's just some southern upper class women were chatting for tea and just, oh, bless her heart, she's just the worst. And it just became a more common thing, and now it's become what it is. So I can't, I don't know exactly what would have gone behind that, but a lot of things for bro and for this kind of more modern slang, one would say, it has been immensely helped in its growth and popularization through social media and the internet.
Is it still dialect if it's age? As far as because a lot of the younger generations have words that we don't understand, and they get their own dialect. Is that the right word for that, or is that something different?
That would be more understanding of just evolution of the language in general. It could be considered a dialect, but for example, with the new generation of kids coming up, there is a completely different understanding of words, a completely different language even sometimes, with some of the slang that is used. That's just exactly what people understand nowadays if they're on the internet. So you could understand it as internet English, as a dialect, but I would consider it more as a evolution of language. Well, I don't. It's not so much a de-evolution. It would be considered, because, you know, some people would consider Shakespeare to modern English a de-evolution, whereas some would consider it a vast improvement, as it's simpler and easier to understand. Language changes with the times and needs of people. So as those change and as the just cultural dynamic changes and everything, language adjusts to compensate for that. So no change is necessarily bad linguistically. It's just the next step in its cycle. Mm-hmm.
I have a question. As someone who is so interested in linguistics, does it bother you when people use like text lingo? Like if someone were to physically actually say to you, LOL, does that bother you?
Yes. Over text, that is something perfectly fine. It's something that has occurred naturally as a way to show emotion. Interpersonal communication face-to-face, it is not needed, as emotion can be conveyed through tone, through facial expressions, which are absent over text. So that's the primary reason that has come about, and while I can understand why some people would say that, I don't like it. Tom?
What do you consider the impact socially and economically of installing a data center that uses 10 to 50 times the amount of electricity and water versus an office building in any suburban or whatever environment where you're going to put it in? All of a sudden you have this huge cube that just sucks all of the resources out of the neighborhood. If we don't do this, the Chinese are going to become the leaders in what is commonly called artificial intelligence or non-human intelligence. What's the trade-off? Shall we become Chinese? Shall we become integrated? That's a very good question. What's your opinion?
So,
Oh, look at the time.
that is a big question. I don't think my full thoughts on the matter can be encapsulated in just a couple of minutes, unfortunately. But I don't think I can fully explain my thoughts on that currently.
You're out of time anyway.
Yeah, we'll close in prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you that I got to teach all these wonderful people here today. I hope this was impactful to at least somebody and informative and just something interesting. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I pray we have a wonderful rest of our day, and that the worship is wonderful, and that Pastor Eric's message is just as, if not more, impactful than Sunday school here today. Thank you so much for all you've done for us, and in your name we pray, amen.